In Street Fighter 6, a new mechanic was added called Drive Impact. It's an armored strike that causes a crumple on punish counter, or a wall splat in the corner, even on block. This allows for a follow-up combo. Its natural counter is itself. If you see someone do it, you do it right back and deal an appreciable amount of damage. Although powerful on the surface, it's very slow at 26 frames of startup. But even though it's considered a very slow move by Street Fighter standards, for reference, an overhead is typically around 20 frames, and has very obvious visual and sound cues, it's still effective even at high-level play. Surprisingly effective. A term you may have heard thrown around is mental stack. Mental stack as a concept basically means that if you're trying to react to one thing, your reactions to everything else will suffer. In a vacuum, anti-airing and reacting to Drive Impact is easy, but together it becomes difficult. There are many other things you have to think about during a match as well, so you can probably see how this can be difficult to manage. Mental stack isn't a new concept, but with the introduction of Drive Impact, and more so Drive Rush, which I'll touch on later, it's been a point of contention among players because of how hard it is to deal with. So how do you get around this? Before we get into that, I need to talk about how reacting to things in Street Fighter works.
Victor slick. Jump.
Raw reaction time is not the only thing that goes into reactions. Far from it, actually. My reaction speed isn't the best, but on a good day, I can react to Drive Rush in neutral.
Wow, that was good reaction, or else I don't know what the fuck.
I can do this because I look for cues that they want to do it and get ready to react. Proper anticipation makes reacting to things significantly easier, which is why it's easier to react to something in training mode where it's in a contained environment. But in order to react to something, you need to know what your opponent's options are and your own options to react with. An example I'll use concerning matchup knowledge would be dealing with Cammy's heavy spin knuckle. Although similarly slow to Drive Impact at 28 frames, this move is hard to deal with even if you know how to. It reaches nearly half screen, goes through fireballs, is plus on block, and leads to a combo on counter hit. If you played against Cammy before, I guarantee that you've been blown up by this move. But if you did your homework, then you figured out that you can interrupt it with a normal on reaction and can now punish her for throwing it out recklessly. That's because you're now aware of her options as well as yours. Knowing what options are available also comes down to your spatial awareness. What I mean is that your options are limited by where you are on the screen. This is why it's much safer to throw a fireball from full screen than it is from mid-screen. If your opponent jumps over the fireball, they can't hit you. The most common application of Drive Impact is for its wall spot properties. So naturally, when your back is against a wall, you should always be anticipating a Drive Impact, assuming they have Drive Meter. This is opposed to somewhere like Ground Start, where a blocked Drive Impact wouldn't do much. To refer to Spin Knuckle again, the most common application of this move in neutral is to go through fireballs and land a combo. This means that if you're trying to zone her out with fireballs, she's more likely to attempt it. However, if she's in your face, there's not much reason for her to go for it because of how slow it is. The probability of you getting counter hit is so much lower that it becomes risky for her to go for it, since it's a relatively easy punish. Therefore, you can devote more of your mental stack to her other options. Comfort also affects your ability to react. Your controller influences how well you're able to react to Drive Impact. It's easier to hit a trigger on a pad than it is to reach all the way over to your Drive Impact button on a stick. Some players have even gone so far as to get new sticks with dedicated Drive Impact and parry buttons for ease of access. I'm still not used to having to use my pinky in Street Fighter. If you have a read on your opponent, it becomes much easier to react to something because you know it's coming. If you know your opponent likes to jump a lot, then anticipate it and start anti-airing. But what if you're expecting them to jump, but they drive rush at you instead? Humans only have a certain amount of space dedicated for reactions. If you practice, you'll be able to react to multiple things at once more consistently, but never all the time. This is what makes Street Fighter 6 so hard. No human on Earth can reliably react to Drive Impact, jump-ins, and Drive Rush while playing neutral, all the time. Speaking of Drive Rush, Drive Rush, or
it's called the Dude Rush? That's what they call it?
Is a technique in which you instantly cancel your parry into a Drive Rush, which allows you to close the gap quickly and force a mix-up. So quickly, in fact, that you're gonna see this happen all the time because of how good it is. And I mean all the time. I'm I'm confident the reason why people aren't anti-airing and reacting to drive impact is because they're trying to stuff a drive rush. Since the cost of drive rush is low and the reward is so high, naturally people tend to go for that option. However, drive rush is not infallible. A great example combining all of what I talked about so far is this clip. I'm in the perfect range for Jamie to drive rush at me. I also know that he likes to drive rush often because he's done so throughout the set. I'm able to deduce that I can go for a reaction super, since it's invincible and will win me the round. All of these things combined lets me react to drive rush and get that fat dub. This is a lot easier said than done.
Oh, so hard this game, man. Fuck.
For those unaware, Dragon Ball FighterZ is a tag team fighting game in the vein of Marvel vs. Capcom. It's very fast-paced and its offense is defined by high-low left-right mix-ups and block strings. The universal throw in Dragon Ball is a 19-frame move called Dragon Rush. Its natural counter is itself, much like Drive Impact, although you get no damage if you counter it. Its sound and visual cues are subtler than DI, but since it's so much faster, you'd expect people to get hit by this all the time. Goichi is famous for having impeccable defense. He could block for 30 seconds straight and tech every Dragon Rush. This is the same guy who warms up by reading an entire book in mere seconds. So how the fuck does Drive Impact work on him? My theory is that because in Dragon Ball, the inputs are very easy, so less of your mental stack is dedicated to not messing up your inputs and more on reacting to things. The difference between anti-airing is a prime example. To do an air invincible uppercut in Street Fighter, you need to go forward, down, down, forward. In Dragon Ball, you press 2H. Another difference is that in Dragon Ball, when you're in block stun, you're not really worried about shimmies or whiff punishing. Unlike in Street Fighter, where block strings aren't nearly as important, and usually leave you minus in the case of Street Fighter 6. So that's why you can't react to Drive Impact. And it's not because you're too old. Special thanks to @meagain_art on Twitter for helping me with researching and scripting. I hope you've learned something worthwhile. I've been Naomi Chungus, and remember, take care everywhere.